In the heart of a silent frontier town, a young widow stood on a rough wooden stage under the burning afternoon sun, her thin hands shaking as the auctioneer's voice echoed across the empty street. Dust swirled around her feet while strangers whispered, some pointing, some laughing. She wasn't a thief nor a criminal. She was a woman the world had decided was broken. Her husband had died, and with him, her hope of being a mother. The townsfolk branded her infertile, useless, and tonight, they were selling her like property. Her chest tightened with shame as each number the auctioneer called felt like a nail in her coffin. She bit her lip, refusing to cry, yet inside, she was crumbling. Who would want a woman the world had thrown away? And then, through the blur of sun and tears, she saw a shadowed figure on horseback ride into the square, changing everything. The young widow stood frozen on the rough wooden stage, her faded gray gown clinging to her trembling frame. She was only 23, yet life had stolen every trace of youth from her face. 2 years ago, her husband's sudden death had left her alone and drowning in whispers. The villagers said she was cursed, barren, a woman who could never give life. Those words had followed her like shadows, until the day the town decided to erase her completely, to pay off debts she had never created. They would auction her as if she were nothing more than an object. Her heart pounded as laughter and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Every stare felt like a knife, every whisper like a scar. She wanted to vanish, to run. But her feet were heavy with shame. In that moment, she realized the world had already buried her long before this auction began. The auctioneer's voice cut through the thick silence, sharp and cold. $50 for the widow, he barked, his tone laced with mockery. The young woman flinched, but kept her chin down, staring at the dusty boards beneath her bare feet. A wave of cruel laughter rolled through the crowd. Men in worn hats and dirty boots leaned toward one another, whispering words that pierced her like arrows. Useless. One muttered, "Can't even give a man a child." Another scoffed. Heat flushed her face, and she wished she could disappear. But the world was determined to watch her break. The auctioneer tried again, voice louder, more impatient. "Come on, gentlemen. She can cook. She can clean. She won't talk back. Who's gonna take her home?" But silence followed, heavy and humiliating. No one raised a hand. Her stomach twisted. Even as property, she was unwanted. She heard a boy snicker, felt the sharp sting of a thrown pebble against her ankle, and the laughter grew. For a moment, she wondered if this was the end, if she would be left standing here, unsold and broken, her shame complete. Then, from beyond the crowd, the rhythmic clop of hooves broke the air. Heads turned. Dust rose in the distance as a lone rider approached the square, his silhouette sharp against the setting sun. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair tied back, a long rifle resting across his saddle. His horse, a black stallion, moved with quiet power, scattering the curious onlookers as it reached the edge of the stage. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Comanche," someone breathed, the word trembling with fear and respect. The young widow dared a glance and caught her breath. His eyes, deep and unreadable, met hers for a fleeting moment. There was no mockery there, no judgment, only something she couldn't name. Without a word, he swung off his horse, boots hitting the dirt with a thud that silenced the square. He stepped forward, every movement calm yet commanding. The auctioneer hesitated, sweat gleaming on his brow. "Sir, you here to bid?" The man didn't answer. He reached into a worn leather pouch at his side and pulled out a small stack of bills, holding them up for all to see. The amount was more than anyone in that town would have offered. A gasp swept the crowd. Murmurs grew frantic. "Why her?" a woman whispered. "What would a Comanche want with a barren widow?" The young woman's heart pounded in confusion and fear. She had expected ridicule, cruelty, maybe even abandonment, but this quiet claim from a stranger was something else entirely. The auctioneer's hammer came down with a crack. "Sold," he barked, his voice shaky. And just like that, her fate shifted. The crowd stared as the Comanche warrior stepped closer, his shadow falling over her small frame. He didn't touch her, didn't speak, only turned to lead his horse and motioned for her to follow. Her legs moved as if in a dream. She didn't know his name, didn't know his intentions. But as she stepped off the stage into the fading light, she felt the first spark of something she hadn't felt in years, uncertain, fragile, and frightening. Hope. The sun had almost slipped behind the horizon when the young widow followed the silent Comanche warrior out of the town. Her heart pounded with every step. Fear and confusion tangled inside her chest. She clutched the edge of her gown, struggling to keep up as his black stallion moved steadily along the dirt road. The town's noise faded into the wind, replaced by the rhythmic sound of hooves and the soft whisper of the evening breeze. She didn't dare ask him where they were going, didn't dare speak at all. Every thought in her head was a question she could not voice. Why had he bought her? What did he want? Hours passed, and the vast plains opened before her eyes, golden fields stretching to the horizon, broken only by clusters of wild trees and distant mountains. Finally, a small ranch appeared, humble but alive with the sound of laughter. Her steps faltered when she saw them, children, 6 of them, running through the tall grass like the wind itself. Their little voices called out in joy, "Papa, Papa." As the warrior approached, the sight struck her like a gentle storm. He was a father, a real one. The children rushed to his horse, clinging to his legs, their faces bright with trust and love. He lifted the youngest, a little girl with braids, into his arms with a soft smile that seemed to melt the hardness from his face. For a moment, the widow forgot her fear and only watched. She had not seen a smile like that in years. He led her to a small cabin beside the main house, opened the door, and gestured for her to enter. Inside was a simple room, a clean bed, a wooden chair, a folded quilt on the corner. He set her small bag, everything she owned, on the table, and finally spoke, his voice deep and calm. "This is your room. Rest. No one will harm you here." She stared, stunned by his gentleness. He turned to leave without another word, only pausing at the door to add, "You are safe, safe." The word echoed in her mind as she sank onto the bed, hands shaking. No man had ever treated her with this quiet respect, not even her late husband. Night settled over the plains, and she listened to the soft sounds of the ranch children laughing in the distance, a horse neighing, the wind against the wooden walls. Questions swirled in her head. Why had he spent so much money to save her from the auction if he didn't demand anything in return? What did a man with 6 children need from a woman like her? Broken and unwanted, the mystery of his intentions was heavier than the silence, and yet, for the first time in years, her heart dared to feel something that both comforted and terrified her. She was not his prisoner. She was not his servant, but she also knew she was not free from the storm he had brought into her life. The first days at the ranch were quiet, almost dreamlike, as the young widow tried to understand the strange new world she had stepped into. At sunrise, she would hear the sound of small footsteps and soft giggles outside her window. The 6 children were always nearby, curious yet shy, peeking in through the open door as if waiting for permission to come closer. On the 3rd morning, the eldest boy brought her a book with worn edges and whispered, "Papa said you can read to us." Her heart ached at the innocence in his voice, and for the first time in years, she smiled without fear. Soon, she was reading stories on the porch, her voice trembling at first but growing steadier with each word. The children gathered around her, leaning against her arms and legs, as if they had known her forever. Days turned into weeks, and she began to feel a warmth that had been missing from her life. She cooked meals in the small kitchen, helped the youngest girl braid her hair, and mended torn shirts for the boys. Every laugh, every hug, every tiny thank you stitched a piece of her broken heart back together. One evening, as the orange sun sank behind the distant hills, the Comanche warrior joined her on the porch. He leaned against the wooden post, silent for a long moment, watching the children chase each other in the fading light. Then, in a low, steady voice, he spoke. "I lost their mother 3 winters ago," he said. "Since then, they've needed someone gentle, someone who could love them without fear." She listened, her chest tight with emotion. He turned his gaze toward her, his dark eyes softer than she had ever seen. "I did not buy you to own you," he continued. "I brought you here because I saw a kindness in you, and they need that more than anything." His words settled over her like a warm blanket. chasing away the chill of doubt that had haunted her since the auction. She realized then that he had not saved her out of pity, nor out of desire, but out of hope for his children and perhaps for her as well. That night, as she tucked the youngest girl into bed and felt the little arms cling to her neck, a powerful truth bloomed inside her. For the first time, she felt like a mother. Though she had never given birth, the bond she shared with these children was not written in blood, but in moments of trust, care, and quiet love. And as she lay in her own bed, staring at the wooden ceiling, she understood something she had never believed before. Family is not only who you are born to, but who accepts you, heals you, and makes you whole. Months later, the same townspeople who once mocked her rode out to the plains, expecting to see a broken woman. Instead, they found her standing on the porch of the small ranch, her hair glinting in the sun, laughter spilling from her lips as 6 children clung to her arms. She no longer lowered her gaze in shame. Her eyes shone with a quiet pride the world could not take away. The man who had once been a stranger now stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. And in that moment she was no longer the infertile widow they had cast aside. She was a mother, a protector, and the beating heart of a family that had chosen her without condition. As the wind carried the children's laughter across the fields, a single truth whispered in her soul: sometimes, the family you dream of finds you in the most unexpected way.